All right, let's do it. Let's do it. I was
Andy,
thinking,
few questions before you get started, my man.
yeah.
Is this the first time reading this book?
Yeah, well, as soon as I saw it was on the list, I
Yeah.
started listening as
Okay,
soon as
cool.
you guys announced it. Um, so I remember how eye-opening reading this or hearing this first part, this SB7. I think I heard a
Yep.
version of, Ellis and some of his workshops, that kind of thing, where he was just probably
Sure.
just stealing stuff from this book, right? So, but then, man, just kind of after you've internalized it, thinking about every good story that you've heard, right? We were just
Yep.
watching Rocky with the kids this last week. I was like, oh yeah, we'll just go through each step here. Here's Mick as the guide, and here's this problem. He doesn't want to be a bum, and here's his solution. So, anyways,
Cool.
yeah, I thought it was really really well done the way he kind of broke it down.
Awesome, man. Excited for you to jump in.
All right, good. Well, for those of, I was thinking that we probably just start with just listing out the 7, and then we kind of maybe piece them up a little bit, because I think like I said, when I heard that at first in its entirety, it didn't make a whole lot of sense. But then when I started to dig in a little deeper, so the first part of the SB7 is the character, right? And so he stresses that character is not you in the story, right? This is not your business. It's not your brand. By the way, after reading this, I'm embarrassed by our website, right? I mean, I think there's testimonials that certainly could help us there, but it's like talking about a bunch of stuff that we've done that no one cares about, right? I thought that was a great point that he made about the listener or reader being like, oh yeah, I would love to hear his story. He sounds like another hero like me, but I don't have time right now because I'm worried about my own story, right? The second has a problem, and Rocky, it's that he feels like a bum his entire life, right? And then he meets a guide, and that guide in Rocky is Mick, who at first ignores him because he thinks he's a bum, he's a waste of talent, but he's got this incredible name, the Italian Stallion. So Apollo says, "Hey, look, I'm going to fight the Italian Stallion. So I'll figure out a way to find the person to fight." And then Mick says, "Okay, maybe I can teach this guy something." Then he calls him to action. Then he helps him avoid failure. And if you remember in Rocky, he's a brawler, right? He's like a what do they call it? Like an bacon and egg fighter, and he needs to teach him how to box. He needs to teach him how to move. He knows he can take a punch. And then in his kind of unlimited ability to absorb pain, he perseveres, and he tells his wife the night before the fight that he doesn't even care really about whether he doesn't really care whether he wins or loses, that he just wants to get through 15 rounds, right? Because he doesn't want to be a bum in the neighborhood. So I think part of the SB framework, the breakdown of what that, and I might be jumping a little bit ahead, but that internal, the kind of villain, the internal, the philosophical, the external forces, as I was reading through this, you're kind of able to see how that all comes together, and how our story, the story that we had for our particular avatar, is way too complex. We're making it about like 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, 7 villains. Instead, it should just be one villain. So I thought in the book he talks about the distraction being a good villain. And I think that's probably for most of our avatars, is they don't know exactly which way to turn, who to invest with, which market to invest with. They're just kind of spinning. So the other takeaway was just about, so that's about kind of clarifying your message. If we have time, I would love to hear if anybody's kind of broken down, even though he tells us to kind of wait on breaking down our character story. I'd be curious to hear if anybody has broken it down and maybe is willing to walk through it. And I could do that as well. So I'll just open it up for any kind of questions and comments on those pieces, and then we can kind of, pitch and catch.
You bet, man. I appreciate you going through that and setting the stage here, Andy. One thing I wanted to mention, I got introduced to Donald Miller through a different book. It was like Blue Light Jazz or something like that. It was some other story that he was telling. I really connected with him because he was so vulnerable in those books. He just was 100% open and honest and kind of just put his life story out there, which was really unique. And then I just watched him just blow up, right? He starts hanging out with the Simon Schuster publisher guy, Michael, I always forget that guy's name, Michael Hyatt. Starts hanging out with Michael Hyatt, and Michael Hyatt basically was his guide along this whole process. And now Donald has really kind of positioned himself as this guide in the marketplace. But he has the best lead magnet that I have ever seen. It's called 5minutemakeover.com. It's his website, 5 minutes, a day that you can use to help get this story framework onto your website. And that's where I first started seeing him. And now I look at my websites and I have a really hard time actually implementing that stuff. I think that it's incredible to go through the framework and think about it of what story it's actually telling. But for me, these books, all these books that we read, I like to print out all these sheets. You guys do too. I don't know. I like to print these sheets and actually start writing, because for me, it's like reading this stuff is cool, but like it never sticks until I actually start putting pen to paper. I don't know if anybody else goes through that, but like once I do, things start clicking. And Donald's done a great job, I think, with his online, story brand. What is that brand script thing that you can actually start writing this stuff out? For me, that was when we launched Compression, actually going through this process was an incredible, I guess, eye-opening experience to think who this main character was and how it all ties together. But if you think about every story, movie that you have ever enjoyed watching or listening to, it's all about this story. And my favorite book, if you guys have not ever read it, is They'll Know I'm Dead When I Stop Talking by Jerry Weintraub. And Jerry was a musical agent and producer for Elvis and for Frank Sinatra and all these guys. And he was this guide for all of these super uber successful people. And I was thinking about, these frameworks. He doesn't even know about this framework, I'm sure, because he's dead now. But like the way that he tells stories is so in tune with this exact, framework that it just, it blew my mind thinking about all those books that actually followed us. So for me, I got to get this thing on paper and start writing this stuff through. That's how it sticks for me, Andy, instead of, thinking about it theoretically.
Yeah, for me, it's the same thing. I gotta read, I gotta write my own notes, and then I create my own kind of index, on the big points inside the book. And I started to that worksheet is really, really powerful. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to do it, but it does kind of it makes you synthesize everything that you're kind of thinking about and really focus on just those things. He says in the book here, which I thought was on page 41, he's talking about all of the people that this should be out there, right? And so it's a book, everybody knows about it. Everybody should be using it. But when you think about almost all of those things that are great ideas, Miracle Morning, all the great books that you've read, very, very few people put those things to work. So I think it's just so simple. It's not going to be easy because it does require you to move your entire website, your team's kind of culture. A lot of that stuff changes, but it's so powerful, right? And it is so simple. So I'd love to kind of get, because I don't know how much time we have on chapter 3. Does anybody else have any kind of commentary or takeaways or questions or objections?
I want to hear, you said that after you read the chapter, you kind of rethought about your framing for the character, right? And you of like, hey, so I'd just love to hear how you'd like to change your website and like what your perspective on what the character is, and then maybe what the villain is, like if the villain is changed and what that simplistic, because I know you said simplicity is what it's lacking. So I guess I know that's a lot, but I guess the character, the villain, and then how'd you make that more simple?
So I think with our fund, I think the character already understands or already likes real estate, right? We don't have to educate them on whether they like real estate. They hop around podcast to podcast. They hear a lot of the podcast operators and they're thinking, yeah, I'd love to put my money there. I'd love to put my money there, but they don't know exactly where to go. So I think what we can deliver with our fund is the ability for them to invest in the best operators, ones that are vetted with our kind of, 70 years of experience in real estate, and then bring them the best in class operators, the best deals. And it's not enough that they're doing that. We want to make sure that they're transforming these communities. And if the investor thinks, which a lot of them do, that, hey, look, why are you taking, you're doing good, why are you taking that out of my returns? Well, there's plenty of money to go around, and most of the strategies that we would employ, like partner life, apartment life, we would basically yeah, they're for sticky tenants. They do well for the property. So anyways, to simplify, I think that villain is the distraction, right? There's like so much noise coming from all different spaces. I think the external is, I want to invest in real estate, right? I think the internal is, I don't know that I'm going to be, I don't know if I can do this, right? That's typically like the big internal struggle. I don't know if I can do this right. And then I think the philosophical question is, how do I get my Saturdays back? I'm working my W-2. I like my job. That's fine. My boss is telling me that I don't need to work on Saturday, but he's making me turn in a project at the end of day Monday, right? So I think there's that avatar there that makes sense for people that are just, I don't want to invest in one operator. I don't want to invest in one market. I want to diversify. So I think that's kind of how we can reach them. But I would love to stress test that with you guys, because you guys are much better marketers. That's the other thing that I would be saying is, just because they're good marketers on podcasts and operators that are out there at panels, etc., doesn't mean they're great operators, right? So I think that we can tap into that a little bit if we do it right.
Okay, so I'm curious, an accurate description of the 7 steps in your world, Andy. So number 1, we have the hero or the character, that investor, right? The person that we want to turn into the hero. Same thing in my business, right? So what's the problem? The problem is that they're stuck, they don't have the time freedom, that they don't have the cash flow, that they don't have those types of things. For your investor, I think what I heard you identify is that they're not accessing the best of operators, right? So that's the problem. And then we step in, both Bakerson and Mike's and your fund in your case, the guide. And then there's a plan, right? So your plan entails getting investors to go into your fund because they can invest in the operators. My plan for my specific project right now is to do a hotel conversion redoing kind of thing. So the challenge, or I should say, when you challenge hero, I'm kind of curious about like identifying all these pieces in both of our stories, right? To see, because I'd like to implement this into a webinar, right? Can I put these 7
absolutely.
things into a story and share it with somebody? Because I think the way that we would promote our webinar doesn't follow this script of in pieces, right? So
Well, why not? I mean, why not? You just named basically through step 5.
Yeah, we're not doing what I'm conceiving here.
I see what you're saying.
Our marketing manager put together a webinar and looking at the webinar and saying, wait, this doesn't follow the script of a movie. Like I'm conceptualizing, how can I make it follow this script, right? So then you got to challenge the investor to, right? So that's a call to action. Hey, invest with us. And then the hero is now they're either helping themselves or impacting the community through you by investing with the best operators that are just good to do, but they're doing good.
Yeah.
And in my case, same kind of thing where we're helping both the hotel industry and the multifamily industry because of the shortage of workforce housing. So, and then the hero gets to become a hero for himself, for his family, for the community, so that he gets that generational wealth and also makes an impact. And that's where the success also lies, right? So, how do we
But
put
Ruben,
that into?
let me ask you a question. On
Do it.
your podcast, you had Mark Smith on. You had Mark Smith
Who?
on a while back on your podcast,
Yeah.
right? It was a gentleman
Yeah.
that you guys had hired to help with the capital raising. He had the
We
most
never hired him,
precise,
but yeah.
compelling, and clear story about an investor. He brought all 7 frameworks into 2 minutes and told that story. You remember that?
I haven't looked if it follows the framework, but I know that his story was very compelling, and particularly the fact that like when you're listening to his story, your opinions are down, right? You're no longer looking for way to defeat the pitch because you're not getting pitched. You're looking for parallels of that guy's story with your own story, which was fascinating.
Is that the 7X guy? Logan?
I don't know who
No.
the 7X guy.
Oh, okay.
No, it's somebody else that.
Yeah, he's with us. He's actually Bruce's coach, or what better said. But he doesn't work with us. We were going to do some stuff together, but he was never on our payroll.
So here's the thing. Traditional presentations developed and created by chief marketing officers do not connect with the end user because they are brought on to bring branding expertise and leads to a website. But that's only one piece of the traffic conversion and economics triangle. They're good at traffic. They're not good at conversion all the time. And so it's really sales people's jobs and or owner of a company to be that converter. And the way that you convert is tell stories like Mark did on your podcast. And so I have even had a hard time getting my, business partners on board because all they want to do, drive in to the deal. But I don't let them because I say, hey, first 20 minutes is all me. So if anybody's ever been on a webinar here, I'll talk, for 15 to 20 minutes before we ever get into the story. And I use a little bit of Loring Plot. I'll use a little bit of the story brand framework. I'll give a little bit of an example, but then we get into the property. And everybody thinks that like first 15 to 20 minutes is, just kind of like, fluff, but it's really not because it's status alignment, right? And that's where you have to get your team on board to say, hey, you guys, we got to get these people in the right mentality before we just drop IRRs and business plans on them. They want to feel that emotion of the story. So it's been an internal struggle for me personally, and I'm sure it's probably the same at Baker.
So I get to, on this webinar that we're going to be doing, I get the moderator or the facilitator. So I actually get to do the intro, and I'm thinking about how do I get this 7-piece story into 2 or 3 minutes, just like Mark Smith did on my podcast, right? And then turn it over to the team to do their thing. So, but I haven't cleared that with them. So we're still in the process of creating this thing, and it just got brought back to mind as I read this before coming on here.
The problem with when we get on presentations is that we think we're pitching to, the neocortex, and we're only pitching to that limbic system first. And so your deal, the business plan, the numbers, the renovation budget, the economics, the demographics, all of that is just like, floats away unless you get them to that point first. That's exactly right. It's noise until you get them feeling good about that, the project that you're actually doing. So really curious to see how that goes, Ruben.
Yeah, me too.
Ruben, curious, is this cold audience or warm audience? In other words, do they know you?
It's a warm audience. It's 506B.
Okay, got it.
So I guess 2 things. One, the pitch deck should tell the story. People talk about the deal story all the time, and that is the real opportunity for you to insert the character into it. I don't know if you guys watched the movie Inception, but the whole concept of being dropped into a dream and the person only knowing what they've been told when they get to that place is how you frame the conversation. Sure, they've got their biases and so on and so forth, but they don't know the story. So if you can frame the story in a place where they can come in and be the hero, that's when they actually get excited about making a logical decision for emotional reasons.
So for the people that have honestly read the story, have any of you guys implemented this structure into your either presentation or your website or anything like that? You have, Jerome?
Well, I hear it in Jerome and Logan in their podcast and compression specifically. Like, yeah, Logan's challenging guys all the time. He's in number 5 a lot, right? So and I feel like I've heard Jerome tell his story very much in this framework.
Yeah, everything I do is based on the framework, from website to podcast interviews. The whole Dreamcatchers podcast follows the hero's journey, right? People
Get outta
don't know
here.
that
That's
they're going
awesome.
through it, but I make them go through the hero's journey with the questions I ask,
Yep.
Wow.
because
He
it
does.
makes it interesting.
I never thought about even trying.
Here's the
to
thing
start
too,
that.
Ruben. One thing you should think about too is the presentation materials that you present on the webinar should not be the same thing that you send them. Okay, so you can have a great story. I would rather present a story and talk about the story and then send follow-up deal information to the targeted list that raises their hand.
There's a certain level of that going on right now.
Yeah, good.
If you're talking about the numbers and you have an analytical person, they're going to derail the whole presentation. So
Yeah.
the whole game is getting everybody involved in the story, talk about the change you're going to make, their part in making the change. And from there, everybody can get excited. And they're either interested in the mission or they're not.
Yeah,
If
we
they're not
kind of
interested-
have that, except out of order, right? So it's just like, here's the story, but it's not really the sequence of events story. It's just like, here's the story of the deal. It's not the story of the hero in the deal. You know what I mean?
If you do it out of order, it fails. And Donald is unabashedly critical of people who don't follow the process because
That's
it doesn't
exactly
work.
what I want to implement it. I want
Think
to implement
about-
it for sure.
If you think about every superhero movie you watch, it follows the exact same path. If you think about every Disney blockbuster movie, it follows the same path. So why would we use anything else to get
Beauty and the
people to
Beast.
engage?
I just gotta convince the team to make it this way. So, because nobody on my team is a marketer. Honestly, I'm the only one. I mean, we have a website marketer, but not somebody that speaks to people even. Like, I'm the only one, other than like, hey, if I need someone like Ben to tell people about the underwriting aspects of it, or, Bruce to say the vision, I'm the only one that's really talking to a lot of people. So I think I have a real opportunity here to implement this 7-step, the SB7 or whatever.
So you do it, right? Create the story, create the presentation, and then give it to them and say, hey, here's what I think. Because I hear regularly, Jerome, you're a really good storyteller. I'm not. I just follow the freaking process. Open the window, figure out where I'm trying to get to. I want to be free. Okay, well, what do we have to do to get free? People keep listening and find out if I actually got free. That's what they want to know. Some of them know the end of the story already, but they want to know how you got to that place.
Problem, agitate, solve. Everybody is solving on these presentations. I find myself falling in the same path, but until you know what the problem is and you agitate it, and it almost feels comfortable. You ask so many questions. Anybody been on a call with Jerome one-on-one? He'll make you feel uncomfortable. Uncomfortable to the point because he's showing you, hey, this, like, I'm not going to tell you, I'm going to make you feel this. And if you don't, I'm going to ask you another question the same way 10 times until you do feel that. And so that is the agitate piece, that once they feel that, then you can come in and solve.
That's really good.
Cool. I don't want to hog too much. I'd love to hear from Matt or Shane or Taiwo.
Yeah,
I'd love to hear from the other guys.
I recently went through basically a personality trait sales class or high producers class through one of our like affluent companies, AIG, for anybody who knows insurance at all. So they are big in the, personality traits. Every presentation should be somewhat outlined the same, but the stories you tell, the way that it's presented, the graphics that you do or don't use should always be different. So one thing that I started doing here really the last 2-3 months, so I'm still in that kind of tracking or research phase, is listening to my initial call and telling, asking those questions, but then letting them talk, right? So listening for issues, listening for hot buttons, listening for things that they're uncertain about or that they don't know, or, even asking expectations. What do you want out of this? Or what do you want your policy to do for you or to work for you? I'm in the insurance world. So it's very, you can get what you want, but there's always going to be a price depending on what you want. So basically what I've started to do is when I begin presenting, it's okay, yeah, a little bit about me and here's my company, here's our big, picture solution. But then I hammer into, you told me this, and I'd outline all their issues. So it's kind of going back to a little bit what we talked about in pitch, or in Claff book, where it's, kind of a little bit that and a little bit of the mirror strategy that Chris Voss uses in his Never Split the Difference. And then so basically I'm saying, okay, here's your issues that you told me. Are we missing anything? And they're, no, that's correct. And then I say, okay, great. And then the next page is literally those issues again. And I say them right back to them. And then here's my solution. Here's how I fix it. Here's how we are going to basically mitigate your uneasiness or get rid of any unwaverance with your current plan. And then I kind of go through the rest of it depending on personality trait. But that's kind of what I've been doing the last few months. Seems to be working and connecting a little bit better, but I am interested to now implement a little bit more of this SB7 because it's fits with what I'm doing, but sales process is always evolving. So
the one thing I would say about what you just offered is, I think it's great. The improvement is you said we're going to fix it, and that makes you the hero. You're the guide, right? You're not fixing it for them. You're helping them fix it. You're giving them the plan so they can fix it. So it's all about them and them being the hero for whoever they're doing it for.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, Jerome, I do agree with that also. This is the first time I actually read the book and actually bought it and took my time to read through. One of the points that I got from that was that, I think it's very important to actually just point out the problem they're facing so they could actually attract the right people, especially in the marketing materials, for example. I went through a brief test through the entire workflow, and I realized that the problem is a very point there, because if you're sending an email right now, put the subject as a problem, the problem the person's actually facing, especially in your marketing campaigns, put that in the subject, we can solve this. It attracts the right people that actually have that problem, actually clicking your email and actually open it. So I think it's very good to be used in, let's say, point marketing. That's what I get from it. I've not finished the book yet, but I'm on it. Just my thoughts.
One way to set this up, because we kind of blew past who the character is for your story, right? We kind of just said, hey, we already know who the character is. When I get on calls, I typically start a call like this, something along the lines, hey, Jerome, there's two types of people in this world. The first type of person takes complete control of their financial independence, and they're taking strides to do that. The second person in this world has no idea that they even have that opportunity. Which one do you think you fall into? Something along those lines. So they start to put themselves into the right character. That way we don't prescribe the same exact solution for every person, right? So really try to, even before you get to the problem, figure out what type of character you're dealing with. And there's easy ways to set that up. I use on a regular basis. I just don't want to blow past that part. I think it's so important to know who you're talking to, because I've talked to people like, yeah, it's been 30 minutes on a call. Like, yeah, Logan, I'm in 8 passive syndications. And I just spent 30 minutes talking about, how to invest in a syndication, where I should have been talking about, hey, why are you guys different and why is Kansas City good? So just make sure you don't blow past that part of the first piece, is the character part. Shane, we haven't heard from you, man. What do you think?
So this is really interesting, and I've been enjoying the talk, but it's very timely for me because I'm probably coming at it from a little bit. Sounds like most of you guys are on the raising capital side. I being kind of building this brokerage practice, this is really timely for me with focusing on seniors housing. These people that I'm reaching out to, they're in a very rough time. It's been a really rough year. And reading this book has really reminded me to try to, as much as I can, to really put myself in their position. Like I realize now I've had pieces of this process sketched in my head, but this has really helped me come up with this story to get in the mindset of what the battle, the journey they've been going on, and the fact that some of them are just so underwater. They know that they need to sell their buildings, and they're going to need to sell their buildings because they're facing forbearance. Occupancy is a disaster. Cash flows are down. So this is really helping me come up with a very clear framework. But like, as Jerome just reminded me again, like, I am not my buyers and my marketing, and it really has nothing to do with me. I have to help them show how they can be the hero in their own exit, right? Their own relief of this trouble that they've got themselves into by no fault of their own. It's just, especially for the smaller, the fragmented, the mom and pop owner operators, they just, as soon as this vaccine gets out, they're going to take a big breath and go, I got to get out of this thing. And I've been trying to come up with something better. I can get in front of these people on the phone. I can download the database list, but I've been working on a better something to say to them and to come up with. And this is just, really helping me kind of sketch it out, but I've got a lot of refining to do on it.
John, who's your character?
Yeah, so I don't know. I'm still working through that. I mean, right now, obviously, just trying to get more sellers, right? So I think that's the thing that I'm trying to focus on more than anything, is trying to understand, what their problem is, what their plight is right now. And then, I mean, eventually it would be, more so JV partners, larger JV partners that could help take down, either just quick turnaround, quick flips on, deals that we're able to pick up from off-market deals that are just undervalued, that we can just turn real quick, or, depending on the size of the deal, being able to take down something larger that could be a longer term hold. So yeah, I don't know. That's my problem right now, is I'm just kind of scrambled all over the place. So I'm really trying to hone in on what I'm trying to do. But like when Shane was just alluding to, I think it's interesting, because I think so many times when I have conversations with owners, it's the same thing. It's like, what can I do for them? And like, hey, I can buy this from you and whatever, but I'm not really digging in on what their plight is and what their situation is. So I think for me, what Shane just said is pretty on point, and I guess just trying to figure that out, because I guess for me, like the stopgap's obviously deal flow. The only way I can get deal flow, as I've seen it in the market that I want to be in, is trying to beat the brokers to the sellers. So it's like, hey, how can I relay a story to them? So it's like, hey, if this is unrelenting, or now you're looking at the different, I mean, I guess you gotta have to get a little bit grim, maybe, but I mean, the different variants, if Biden turns the tap off with the Fed printing, what's the risk factors, what's the downside scenario of what could happen? Like you bought this to protect your family and to have a legacy asset. It's right now it's valued as high as it's probably been in your entire life. The risk with you holding on to this and potentially keeping it on, even though it sounds resilient and like you're trying to hold on, there's a lot of risk factors on the downside, as if the world does turn to shit, and you hold on to this too long, you could be letting it go for 50% of what you could get today. So
You just closed the deal, no? Late last year?
Well, I was saying right now. No, yeah, last year, but she wasn't. But I'm saying, but she was like not. I didn't have to wrestle with her, right? So it's like I'm trying to understand, how do I get with the people that I need to wrestle with that are like having issues with the conversation. So like, there's like one that I'm working on right now that could be a decent size win, and like the guy gave me all the financials. We were ready to go. We were like negotiating on price, and this is like right before Christmas. Week before Christmas, he shoots me a note. He's like, "No, I'm not. I'm good now." So I'm gonna follow up with him this week. But I'm kind of thinking of, how do I reframe the conversation with him around this and kind of talk through those risk factors, especially because they're like C-class, Winston-Salem, he's got to be hurting with collections right now, regardless of what he wants to say. So
here's how you do it. This is how I do it in our business. So you take that deal and you put it through the SP7 framework into a case study. It's a 2-pager. And it's a front and back 2-pager that you walk somebody through, a seller. I do this all the time. Hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, here's $50 million worth of real estate we have transacted over the last months. And here are 3 case studies that, are different scenarios that person is in. And I walk them through how they are the hero every step of the way. So if you can't, hand that to them, email it to them, in a nice framework where they can read it and they can share it with their wife or their husband, whoever owns the property, and they can really sit with that, then your story is going to be lost, because all they're going to hear on the phone calls is, this guy's trying to get my property. But if you get that in the mail to them, if you get that in an email, if you hand it to them in a nice little framework, man, those case studies, believe it or not, these baby boomers that own all these properties, they love printing stuff out and touching it. It has worked wonders for us, man. So I would highly recommend using the same framework and putting numbers to every single step of the way and showing them in their scenario. And one of the examples could be, hey, I took the initiative to put your property into this, and this is exactly what it would look like. So I would highly recommend trying that.
Yeah,
That's great.
That's awesome.
That's
I appreciate
great.
that.
I do it on the other side too. So people sitting on 500 grand worth of equity in California. I'm like, hey, have you ever heard of return on equity? Like, what are you talking about? I'm like, well, how much equity do you think you have in your property? Great. What's your income? Awesome. What are your expenses? Okay. Divide that by that, and you're making 0.014% on your money. And I'm like, I can't tell you that math is incorrect. That's the numbers. And they're like, yeah, but what do I do with it? Well, here's a 1031 exchange. You don't have to pay your capital gains. And here's a case study that we just did on a $4.2 million property. You could be doing the same thing, just like a light bulb.
That's good.
Yep.
But how are you making them the hero, Logan? How are you making them the hero when they do that?
Putting cash flow in their pocket, baby. That's exactly what it is. I'm like, so you're telling me that your mortgage over here is $4,500 in California and your rent's $4,900. Fantastic. What did it cost you to replace this, and this last month? Fantastic. So you're telling me over the last 12 months, you have made on average about $67 per month on a property that's worth $1.5 million. Let's do that math real quick. So I'm making the hero to say, holy cow, I can go double that, triple that, 100x that in somewhere else, and somebody's going to guide me along the way. It's exactly how I do 3 to 4 1031 exchanges on a regular basis through the same process. But it has to be that light bulb moment, and you got to find it for the people that you're talking to.
So what do you think? So a lot of these people have these things like free and clear, right? Because they've inherited it, or they have it, they held it for like 20 or 30 years. So do you think that what I was talking about with the villain of like, the risk factors of if the economy turns or if real estate takes a dive or whatever, so the villain or, the avoiding failure for them would be just capitalizing currently today versus risking what the future may hold or shit. They could even get COVID, or whatever. You're old ass, like, take the money and run today.
I think that could be very easily put into a couple blurbs as as Logan's referring to in case study, you know, here's some of the, what are people saying about worst case scenario or where that market's going or whatever that is. You're kind of showing them and then you're letting them figure it out, right? I think that's a way to do it.
Yeah, because
Plus, I
their
imagine
main
a lot of
point-
those.
their-
Go ahead,
Andy.
Logan. Well, one point I wanted to just to follow up on what Logan was saying is I imagine that same strategy, John, with a lot of the properties that you've got. You know, they may be making some cash flow, but in order for them to get what they need to get, they're going to have to put quite a bit of improvements into the property, right? So their rents are going to be a lot lower, and they're probably not getting that big of a return. But here, if they take this money and put it into something else, you know, exchange it, that might be a win for them. So
something you might look into too, John, is DSTs. And I hate to say that on this call because, you know, frankly, DSTs are my number one competitor in the marketplace, but it doesn't stop people from doing them, right? I see so many folks that have owned property 25, 30 years, then go trade into a Class A property in a, you know, in a gateway market that has 6 to 7% return, and they don't have to mess with it. That's the villain, is messing with the property. So that's the pain point that I would continue to agitate in that scenario.
and there's a lot of people out there too, if it's big enough, I don't know what size you're working in, that would do, you know, if it's 500,000 in equity, you know, they would allow a co-ownership tick in their property, in their syndication. I know a lot more people, I've seen a lot more deals this last 6-9 months in that way.
Yep.
All right. Well, that's great stuff. So I didn't want to cut into Matt's time because we still got to get into chapter 4 a little bit, or do we want to put that on the back burner for next week and chop it up more? What do you guys
Well,
want
I
to
think
do?
chapter 4 is just a character, right?
Yeah, chapter 4 is just exactly. So I guess we got into it a little bit.
Yeah, we got 15. So Matt, I like you know, go ahead and take it away, man.
So I'll just kind of brief through my takeaways and, you know, stuff like that, and then we can jump back into conversation. So, I got on, I don't know if anybody else got on the My Story brand website, but I watched the video and the little blurb that they showed of Donald Miller talking said, a story only gets started when we define something our customer wants. And I thought that was so true. Really kind of impactful and encapsulates the entire chapter in whole, which obviously is why it was put on there. But my couple others were just to connect with the client. You know, you need to know what they want. It doesn't really matter what you want them to know. You know, another one that I thought was a good one or a big one was engagement from the customer comes from them trusting you and the brand that you created. And then the last one that I came up with was communicate what the customer wants simply. And, you know, basically confusion equals disconnect or disinterest. So those were kind of my biggest takeaways of the chapter. Something that, I think that one to the last one. One notion I didn't necessarily agree with, which I thought I'd love to get your guys' opinion on, was, you know, gaining status often leads to luxury. I don't know that I necessarily completely agree with that whole concept. I agree with parts of it in what he said and kind of outlined, but would love to kind of dig into that in a little bit. Actions that I'm going to be taking is just, you know, kind of continually simplifying my brand and My Story brand and doing the online workbook. You know, I've already completed it, but how can I make it simpler? How can I make, you know, my crazy vast product or multiple products just stupid simple to where, you know, a third grader could understand it? And then personal experiences confirm or refute what the author presented. You know, confirming, you know, building social networks. So we pretty much all of us have connected either on LinkedIn or some sort of social network and continue to engage with one another on there, building our own audiences, but also being a part of one another's. So I really like that one. Again, confirm that, you know, a confused mind leads to disconnect or disinterest in the customer's sake. And then failing to connect and open a story gap. the client loses interest or never even starts to gain interest because that story wasn't created. So the one where I kind of wanted to start our conversation was, something that I didn't necessarily completely understand, and that was, when connecting with the customer, if we learn their interests and the different direction that they kind of envision, do we stick to our brand script as far as trying to bring them aboard and tell stories and again, stick to our brand script, or do we kind of float to where they want and go in the direction that they want because it'll best connect with them? So I'd love to get you guys' thoughts kind of starting there.
That's good, because I think a lot of that has to do with how you can kind of frame the questions and still get the information out of them. At the end, he talks about, the idea of like a hitchhiker. You're not going to give your entire story to a hitchhiker. He just wants to know, can you get me to San Francisco or not, right? So I thought that was I think that's kind of interesting. And to Jerome's point earlier, it is really about the questions that you're asking that particular person. I think Logan has two that either they answer one way or they answer the other way. You're starting to get a sense of what's their experience in investing and what's their relationship to it, right? They're just going to open up. If there's two types of investors, you're one or the other. So that's my take on it.
I would always stay true to your brand script. Now, if you have the wrong character, that's where you get in trouble, because you're talking to somebody who doesn't have the problem that you have the solution for. Right. So make sure, and Logan, you gave you a great strategy for that. Make sure that when they choose their adventure, they're choosing the adventure that actually fits the problem you solve. And if it doesn't solve, you can't solve their problem, they're not a buyer anyway, so just get out. Like a lot of times we just want to close, we want to make the sell, and there's no value in that because everybody's just frustrated and you fight throughout the relationship. So let them choose their adventure if you solve multiple problems. But I'm actually going through the next book, Business Made Simple, that came out last week. And, they talk a lot about if you don't solve one problem extremely well, then all you do is confuse everybody when you're trying to solve multiple problems. And so if Andy's going to solve the problem of, not knowing how to vet operators, I think that's really the problem he's solving. He's solving it using a fund and they do all the work of vetting the operators. Then doing anything else or talking about anything else is going to confuse them about what he does. And I had a lot of that a year ago. It's like, well, what do you do, Jerome? It's like, oh, well, I buy apartments and I fix them. Great. What can you do for me? Absolutely nothing, right? Because I don't raise capital. So get clear about the problem you solve. And then from there, let the person opt into that story. And if it doesn't fit any of your stories, then get out as soon as you can, because you're wasting your time if you want to sell. So get the referral to somebody that has that problem.
Matt, so I know you talked about like AIG and kind of the core customers, and I know kind of the folks that you primarily focus on, but like, I mean, how well defined do you think your character is right now? And are there any things that you're thinking in your head right now after reading the chapter that you could either engage more effectively with your character or differently to them?
Yeah, I mean, I started filling that brand out, and like I've been fairly clear on who my character is for like the last year and a half or so. But it's continued to evolve and become more targeted, right? But I think my biggest struggle has been, finding the best way to connect with them, because insurance is such a topic that nobody wants to talk about, including myself, right? I hate looking over my personal insurance. And so like that is my job, right? Is trying to find those hot buttons for people or like my target audience, right? I know that 60% of them don't have the right coverage that they should have. but I can't say that to them. You know what I mean? I maybe eventually down the road, but for me, it's that interest of, finding or creating those case studies, or those real life situations that I can kind of not use a scare tactic per se, but a lot of times that's what insurance is, right? It is a scare tactic, and if you don't have this, and you're going to pay out of pocket because you don't have it. So for me, I've found a few good opportunities in what I've been doing, and my character. But I think that this book, and really the last couple books, have challenged me to make that character a single person versus a group of people, or a certain type of family. So it's continuing just to kind of think about what does that person look like? Where is that person spending their time? How can I best connect with that person or that character, right? So I think that, as I continue, in January for me has been research this, both more on this book, but also, my client, where does this character spend their time, their money, their philanthropic efforts, and then kind of adjusting my brand script, or not adjusting, but kind of creating my brand script to fit what that character would look like.
Well, I think he talks about the survival piece. So I would encourage you, and I'm going to do the same, to kind of go through all of those, conserving financial resources, time, networks, the search for meaning, I think is probably the most important, but picking questions that would kind of pull that out of them so that you can better lead them on your tour, right? Or on their tour, I should say.
Yeah, let's not make it too tough either, right, Matt? You've got great clients. Go to one of them and ask them the exact questions that he lines out, right? I mean, if you guys, I'll have this resource that breaks this thing down into questions that you can ask. But hey, you can ask your top client, who were you and what did you want? What was the problem you encountered and how did it make you feel? Who did you meet or what did you read that helped you? What plan did you come up with after meeting the guide? What did it feel like to take action on that plan? What could have been lost if you have failed? What was the happy ending that you experienced? There you go. There's the story framework right there. Just ask your top client and use that as a talk track, and boom. Now, that's for people who already express interest. Finding those people is a different conversation, right? But I think that, you already have great clients. I'm one of them. Ask me, sit down. What did I do? Let's go through that together. And I do that all the time with clients, and it frankly allows me to not use scare tactics because it's real, and it's real because we've solved the problem for them. So that's how I attack that piece, at least. Getting people to see that, is a different conversation to be had. But once you do, using that, that framework and those questions is highly successful in my experience, at least.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, it's you're right. It seems so simple because, I ask my clients, or I have it in previous years, if I need a specific type of referral, or if, they had, a certain type of, service that they use, right? Whether it's a realtor or a mortgage or a, accountant or whoever, right? I asked for those introductions. So why wouldn't I ask specifically about what they want? I never even thought about that. That's great.
And then make it easy for people to refer you, right? Give somebody a case study for the mortgage broker. Hey, here's 25 folks that we help get, insurance by their timeline. And here's 3 ways why we are the better fit and we'll get the deal done, right? Like, just like you did on my personal home. Like, hey, Logan, you need better insurance, but to get the deal over the finish line, we're going to have to do this, this, and this. And then once we close, what did I do? I emailed you and said, all right, ready to move it up, right? So things like that will just give you credibility instantly. And, having a document or even a series or a class or your posts be geared towards that is highly successful. And especially if people are going to be referring you, it's very easy for them to refer you if they know how to refer you and they can send something that you've already sent them. That's when the referrals really start to happen.
That's great. Sorry, everyone. I've got a 3. Thanks for all the feedback. Appreciate you all. A lot.
Yeah, thanks for being on. I really appreciate you, man. Thanks for taking the lead on that chapter.
You guys.
All right. I got to run too. Talk to you guys soon.